Hello, and welcome to Women in Business, where we interview entrepreneurs and senior managers and show you the strengths, successes, obstacles, and roadblocks women experience in business. Since I believe every person in business needs to be visible, I'd like to invite you to watch www.sob6, that's the number 6, tips.com, which will give you some valuable information should you get the call to be on radio or TV, which I think is extremely important. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at Gayle Carson, that's Gayle, Gayle Carson 13 at gmail.com, or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
Interesting guest for you today, ladies. Her name is Shirley Baldwin, and she's a best-selling author and a relationship coach, and her past 15 years is really interesting because her clients have included MLB players, which is, of course, baseball, celebrities, children, women in transition, and couples. In her book, Get What You Want from Your Man, Shirley speaks directly to women. She has a passion for inspiring women to embrace their feminine and to use that energy to create anything they want in their relationships. Working in baseball, Shirley helped high school, college, and independent league players mentally prepare for the next level. So welcome, Shirley, to our show.
Thank you, Gayle. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you wrote this book for women, and you work in baseball. So how did all of this come about? Tell us. It must be very interesting.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I'll spare you some of it, but I worked in baseball for the last 12 years, and I worked with, 12 to 15 years, I worked with major league players. And what happened was, as we noticed what was going on the field, we realized that there was always something going on in the background behind that. And so as I got deeper into working with these players, I started working with their wives and their children and them as a family. And I really spent a lot of time studying and learning relationships and women. I am a woman. So, and I was a woman in a man's world. And so hearing their perspective on us and knowing our perspective on them, it made it for really interesting to kind of be working on both sides. So I primarily worked with men, and I have 7 kids. So I really wanted to spend more time with my family and not traveling all around. And about a year and a half ago, I decided to quit working with baseball players and write a book for women from everything that I learned in those years. And I was at my book signing in DC, and somebody approached me and had heard about me and asked to hire me for their nephew. And so then here I am back in baseball again. So I've got both things I'm juggling now.
But what exactly do you do in baseball for them?
So I teach them a lot of things. Basically, the world would call it life coaching, although I didn't know what it was called when I was working with them. I work on a mental skills side, helping them overcome barriers and obstacles that get in their way of being their best, being at their highest peak performance. And that comes along with teaching them how to relate to others, teaching them about how to present themselves to people, to the media, to social media now, just all aspects of, these people that play professional sports they're superhuman, and they've spent their whole life basically focused on one thing. And so I help them to focus on life around that.
That's interesting, because you wouldn't normally think of major league players being interested in their life skills, shall we say, or, personal side. So that's very interesting in itself. But how does a woman be powerful in a man's world without masculine energy or acting like a man?
Well, what I realized when I started in that, I realized that there was a lot of masculine energy just everywhere. And looking around there were a few other women in the field, but not in my field exactly, but in baseball. And as I watched and learned from them, I realized that they wanted to try to compete as a man in a man's world. And I don't even actually know how to do that. So I'm like, well, I'm going to try to do this with my own feminine energy. And I went in as a woman, and I really had no competition because the way that I was being to these people drew them to me. And I don't know if it's, there's like a nurturing aspect that they don't necessarily get in the game because they're all working, on testosterone and trying to compete and all of that. But I feel that I definitely brought a softer side, even though I still feel like I hold some authority and expertise over them, or I really try to just meet them at the level that they were at and be, guide them from a different level, just a different energy. And they would always say to me, wow, you do this, you make me want to talk to you, or you make me want to open up, or I feel like I can tell you anything. And I feel that came from having a different energy than they were used to having.
That's interesting because, I have always said I have much more masculine energy than feminine energy. So it's interesting, to hear it come from the other side. But how do you balance being powerful in the business world and as a mom and wife at home? I mean, you've got 7 kids. I don't know what their ages are, but that's not an easy life to balance as well.
Well, their ages are 4 to 14, and I'm in a blended family situation. So I have 4 kids that I've raised, and then I have 3 that are new to me the last couple of years, and I have them 50% of the time. And so it's definitely taking a step backwards into, being a mom again and that type of thing. But I've always felt like I always seek to serve others in my business and at home. And I feel that I have to come from a place of authority in both places also. But when I'm at home, when I walk in the door, I really try to be intentional about letting go of maybe the power or the powerful aspect of being in that world, and just realizing that these are my people and this is my home. And because I love having my feminine energy, I love my husband having his masculine energy. And so there's no reason for me to come in and be super powerful in our house and try to take over that energy. I try to just complement him with who I am. And so I would say at home, they see me as a softer, just more like mommy, sit on my knee and read me a book kind of a person, where out in the world, they're always surprised to hear that I have that at home.
No, I think it's wonderful. I mean, whether it's a blended family or not, 7 kids are 7 kids. And when you are saying they're from 4 to 14, I mean, there's a great diversity of need that's there. I mean, the 4-year-old is still in I need you kind of thing, and the 14-year-old is saying, I don't want you anymore. So
yeah,
great diversity.
Actually 4 to 24. And I have 2 grandbabies.
4 to 24.
Yeah,
okay. All right. Well, then there is a great diversity there.
A lot.
So what do you think sets you apart from others that are in this particular line of work?
Well, what I offer is I teach them the mental skills. And then I'm also, because of my years in the field of baseball and my network that I've built and the people that trust me, my clients get to have video calls once a month with current major league scouts, coaches, players, which gets them up to date, behind the scenes, everything that's going on. And also it gets them a lot of exposure, where that's not what I market myself as, is exposure, but they do get that. And I do have clients that have been signed to professional teams just from meeting these players. The other thing I think that I do differently is there are a lot of people in baseball that have played baseball that are ex-MLB players or ex-coaches, and they run their program. And like even from what you do, we kind of all develop what we think is the right way to do something, or the way that we think everyone should do it. And each of these players come with a unique set of skills that they had themselves. And so what I do in my business is I take from as many of those as I can and give a large variety of perspectives. And each client fits in with something, they will take from each thing, but they'll usually resonate towards one way or another way. And then once I figure out what way they resonate towards, I can push them towards a person that will help them in that aspect, and their way of learning, I guess, would be the right way of putting it. But yeah, I don't feel that I have my own perspective or my own way of doing things. I do feel that they get a very large variety of options and ways to be able to learn.
So now the question is, and I'm not sure if there is this or not, but I'm going to ask you, what about women in baseball? Is that happening? What's new and forthcoming there?
Well, it's funny you ask. I just got back from Vegas this past weekend, and they were holding Major League Baseball's winter meetings there, and that's the meetings at the end of the year where all the teams get together, the GMs, ESPN's or MLB Network is there. They all pull together and they do some trades and they have meetings on what the New Year's agenda is. Well, I was invited to my first women's in baseball meeting on Sunday night, and there's a lot of things going on there. I got to meet Jackie Robinson's daughter, and she's a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of talk about the barrier being crossed right now and broken down, and women are getting jobs. There were 130 women there, and all of them, except for me, had a job currently with the MLB. So I subcontract, so I don't have a job paid by the MLB, but they all had jobs. So that's 130 women that I know of that are working for these different clubs and the bureau, and they
in meaningful jobs, Shirley, in meaningful jobs.
Yes, like coaching and mental skills and front office, and jobs that I don't know 5 years ago wouldn't have gone to women for sure. And so there's a big change coming on right now. They have an inclusion and diversity department now within the MLB, and they are working on bringing women in as players eventually too. I do believe that's going to happen. It's unofficial, but I do believe that will happen in the very soon future.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Of course, you go back to that, what is that movie that was made, A League of Their Own, and all of that has kind of quietly disappeared, I think. But it's good to know that in the business end of things that women are being considered. So what are some of the wins and the losses? In other words, what are some of the successes? What are some of the failures that you've had?
I would say, first of all, I believe that failures are successes in disguise, because I believe that that's how I've learned everything in my life. I have been divorced 3 times and married 4 times. And I think that people would see that as a failure, maybe, at first sight. And part of my book is about that and what I've learned from that. And I think that as we go through our failures in life, we're able to learn and grow and not make those same mistakes again. And so I feel that would be maybe a failure that people would call a failure. And then successes, I really feel that being a woman in baseball is a success. And I'm really looking forward to the possibilities in the future for that. I've had a lot of successful businesses, but I feel like that's a success. And I love watching my kids all living out their dreams, and the success of that is huge for me too. It feels very rewarding to know that I've been able to balance both of those.
That's interesting because, you're right. I mean, if you've gone through 3 marriages, you've gone through 1 you're in now, and you've got a blended family, there's something to say about your husband who was willing to take a chance on someone who had been divorced 3 times. And
For
it's something
sure.
to say for you to say, I'm going to make this work, and the fact that your kids are successful and healthy and positive all makes a difference too. So we all go through things in life and we wonder why we made the choices that we did, but there's always a reason for it. So what thing would you offer right now that would have others start thinking about something?
Well, I think if I could say one thing, it would be that our whole lives were raised with a right box and a wrong box. And if we believe that we're right, it automatically makes someone else wrong. And I believe that there's this ginormous space in between that is a just is box. And when we can start to look at others and choices that they make and who they are in the world as it just is, and it's not wrong because it's different than what I believe, it opens up this whole new space for loving and understanding and acceptance. And that has really created a huge shift in me and in those around me. And I see the world completely differently that way. And so I would say, yeah, everything doesn't need to go into a right and wrong box. And my kids will say, Mom, what about murder? That's for sure wrong, right? Murder's wrong. And of course, the first thing we would say is, yeah, but then I think, and I say to them, well, what if someone was trying to hurt my kids? What if someone's breaking my house? We could go on and on about what we feel is wrong and what it would look like from someone else's perspective. And so I think that that's a huge shift in a mindset to realize that just because we believe something's right or doesn't make someone else's beliefs wrong, that we can just really be open and accepting of everybody where they're at.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, but it certainly is something that people can look at. Absolutely. So how do you bridge what you're doing in baseball and what you're doing with your book? Because your book is entitled Get What You Want from Your Man. So that would kind of make you an expert on men and I don't know if you want to call it manipulation or what, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the title of my book, I named it that so that I would be meeting people where they're at, meeting women where they're at. The basis of my book is to be able to get what we want from our man or woman or in relationships without manipulating or playing head games. The whole basis of my book is how we can recognize how we are being individually in our relationships, and that we have the power to create whatever we want from that. And so the way that it works with baseball is I used to think that I had to choose one or the other. And what I realized is that I can choose both. I teach the same thing. I teach about seeing from other people's perspectives. I teach how to relate in any situation that you're in. I teach people to be aware of what they're feeling and going through on their inside so that how they're being on their outside to people can have cause in the matter. And what I've learned is that it doesn't matter whether it's a woman or a man or relationships or baseball, everything that we do is a relationship. And so I decided that I would choose both, and it's been wonderful. In fact, I have a lot of great reviews from baseball players that have read my book. So
that's what I was going to ask you. What's the feedback you've gotten from this book, either male or female? What's the biggest aha that people have said to you?
I commonly hear, I wish I would have had this book this many years ago before I started a relationship, or I wish I could have given this daughter this book before she was in a relationship. It's endorsed by a man by the name of Joe Anglim, and he was a star on the TV show Survivor for a couple seasons. And he read it and wrote the foreword for me because he felt that it was that all the beliefs that he had growing up and watching his parents and families around him. When he read my book, he said it made sense to him, and he just really loved that. And a lot of the baseball guys think that they've bought it for their wives. And I actually had my husband's a doctor, and one of his partners walked into our house last week and in tears said, "Your book changed my life. I've realized that I've been being very selfish in my relationships." And this came from a man. So even though I wrote it with a focus on actually one woman, one ideal reader, one person, I feel that the reach has been very far.
You know, you've said something there that's very important. And for our listeners, when you think about your business, you know, many of you think that everybody is your market. I mean, when you ask somebody, well, who wants your product or who wants your service? Everybody. Well, everybody's not a market. And what, you know, Shirley just said, which is, I wrote it with one particular person in mind. That's exactly what you should do. You need to think of your avatar, your one person, that when you write a book, you're writing it to this person. When you're developing your business, you're developing it for this business. Now, you might get other people, just like I don't think you expected that men would be reading the book, but they are, and they're benefiting from it. But you approach a customer as an avatar. Who is your ideal avatar? Who is your ideal customer? And that makes all the difference in the world. So where would people get this book, Shirley? How can they find it? How can they find out more about you? Where will they be able to do this? And I don't know if you have anything that you want to offer to our audience, but certainly you're willing and able to do that. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, I do have a website. It's pretty preliminary for my book, and it's entitled getwhatyouwantfromyourman.com. And I have my Facebook page is a really good way to contact me, and that would be Shirley Baldwin, Baldwin, Owens, Owens. And I'm happy to send anybody a free copy of my book that contacts me through either of those channels. And on the baseball side, the website is mymajorleaguementor.com. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that side of it too, and even give a free book from that side.
Okay, so we know that if you go to her website, you can get a copy of her book for free, which I think would be fantastic. And also, I want you to give your website just one more time, Shirley.
Okay, it's www.getwhatyouwantfromyourman.com.
Getwhatyouwantfromyourman.com. So, you know, you've got a couple of ways of looking at this, and it's very interesting because here really is a great example of a woman in a man's world. And you're also getting to a point where, you know, I think it's wonderful that there are 130 women that gathered at this meeting and in Vegas, and all of them are involved in baseball on a very significant way. So all of that is extremely, extremely interesting. And I think if you get this book, you're going to learn a lot on how to live your life. So I can't ask for anything more than that, right? You know, so we've got about a minute or two left, Shirley. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we have not talked about as yet?
Well, one, I love the idea of what you said about, I have realized that the smaller the focus, the bigger the reach. So that's in all of my business. That's one of the things that I also believe in. And then the other thing is just, it's way better to learn lessons from someone else who's made the mistakes than to have to try to make them yourself. So I definitely speak from experience in that area. So I'd love to hear feedback or love to send a free book. And I'm really grateful that you invited me to be on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So remember, go to Get What You Want From Your Man.com and download a copy of her book. And I think it's going to make your life a lot easier. This has been fantastic, Shirley. Thank you so much for being with us today. And hopefully our listeners will learn a lot about how to present themselves in a man's world. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gayle. You're wonderful.
Thanks for listening to Women in Business. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you have any suggestions as to who you'd like me to have as a guest, just email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. Be sure to check out www.sob6tips.com. And in the meantime, go to www.spunkyoldbroad.com to see the resources I have for you.